Hey everyone. Okay, so one of the first things to talk about is that while not exactly how I predicted it would be, the situation with Kuma and Bonney is pretty much what I thought it was as well, which is that Kuma made a blood for blood deal with Vegapunk. In exchange for saving Bonnie's life, Kuma had to submit himself to Vegapunk's research in helping to create the pacifistas, which yeah, we'll get to that little tidbit in a moment, but one small detail that I did like about Kuma's journey to find a cure is that his search had led him to all the different islands and locations that would inevitably be where he would send the Straw Hats to for their 2 years of training. But also, when Kuma's search does eventually lead him to Vegapunk, I like how the solution to curing Bonney is, in a sense, this world's version of stem cell research. Like, it's stem cell research, as we know, is kind of one of those. Is one of those things that has always been a bit of a moral quandary for us as human beings, and in that same sense, for this case, there is definitely a slightly the way Vegapunk explains it, there might be a slightly a morally dubious aspect to it, but ultimately it is a treatment that does help in order to save lives as well. And in this case, it's a treatment that did help to save Bonnie's life. And yeah, let's just get right into the deal made between Kuma and Vegapunk about how saving Bonney literally led to the creation of the pacifistas. And once again, this really feels like one of many cases where Vegapunk didn't fully grasp the ramifications of his own actions and just what this would eventually lead to, at least not until it was too late, because as shown, that whole conversation was being monitored by Jay Garcia, and unless I'm reading the room wrong on this, it sounds like the very first real test of the Pacifista project was on Sorbet Kingdom, which, oh boy, that's definitely an irony of it all, but it definitely, there's definitely a cruel irony there, but it definitely tracks considering Sorbet was the first experiment of a kingdom kind of breaking free from the government's grasp. And saddest part about this as well is that there was such a mutual respect between Kuma and Vegapunk in terms of how hopeful and idealistic they were about pretty much what Vegapunk's research could do for the good of mankind, that I don't think either of them were really prepared for how this would backfire. Like, let's be real. What we know now in terms of the present, what's going on in the present and whatnot, this whole shit backfired tremendously on Vegapunk without him even probably knowing it would backfire on him. But yeah, just once again, it's a case of Vegapunk. I don't think just not taking the proper precautions that are necessary, because he just let it all go to shit. And but at the same time you do see how that would eventually lead to what he would eventually say about what to his beliefs, and ultimately how what we see in terms of his like animosity like towards the government themselves. Like, yeah, he's someone who doesn't really how that would lead to his distrust and how he was betrayed by them in a way. And yeah, I do find a really delicious irony by the fact that it was the liberation of Sorbet Kingdom that gave Kuma the moniker the Tyrant, and how the only reason he was known as such is because asshole King Bakuri was so butthurt about being overthrown that he kind of just caused his own demise. Like, it's in Kuma's attempt to try to save Sorbet in order to save the kingdom, it ultimately is the thing that gave him his moniker. Whereas the king himself, Corey himself was doing shit that was far worse. I also like how, even though Kuma was technically the king, he had the foresight to know how the events of his rebellion would look, so he had the previous king, Bulldog, take up the public image of king of the country instead, whereas he kind of acted as sort of the king behind the shadows, so to speak, the one who was truly the one looking after the people. Which, while we're on the topic, though, the fact that Bakori committed an even more heinous crime of attempting to recreate the Great Terminal incident in his own kingdom is just another indicator that it's Kuma who... It's indicator that even though it's Kuma who is considered the tyrant, it's just another instance of how few and far between the actual good and decent royalty, like the Nefertari family and the Riku family, actually exist in this world. Like, it's something we already knew, but the fact that the royalty in this world just continues to be still continues to go to these kinds of lengths just to purify the filth and not realize that kind of shit only spurs on rebellion rather than hindering it, always baffles me. Like, being a good and decent human being never occurred once to these assholes in their lives, and it's forever like the cruelest irony of this world. Like, and I guess the real world in general is people in power always abuse it, but it's like, seriously, these assholes are just like on a whole other level of that shit, in my opinion. Of course, one of the other things this chapter touches on is how Bonney gained her powers, and honestly, just knowing what we know about Bonney and her journey through the story and how she has been a 12-year-old navigating through the Grand Line this entire time is both impressive and a little on the ewy side when you remember Blackbeard wanted to make Bonney his woman. Like, it's one of those scenes where looking back makes you wonder, was he aware of her secret at all? Because even though someone like Blackbeard has certain standards, and I like to think he wouldn't have done that had he known, hell, he probably wouldn't have done it had he known Kuma was her father. It's just those little, it's just one of those like little what if questions that I'm the most curious about, knowing what we know now. Also, we get a nice little bit of background lore in the chapter that, yeah, Bella Betty was the one who assumed command over the Eastern forces, taking up Ginny's mantle, which I do like Kuma's little like jab at the fact that foul-mouthed women are almost destined to take command of the Eastern forces, but I also wonder if that might be a little bit of foreshadowing to the idea as well that once this part of Bonnie's story is wrapped up and just learns to maybe accept that her father is beyond saving, that she'll join the revolutionaries. Because one of the big question marks about Bonnie during this arc as well, for me, has been, where exactly is her crew? Did they escape with her and we just haven't seen them yet? Or was she the only survivor of whatever escape effort they made after Akainu had captured her, because after Akainu had taken her in? Because if it's the latter, then that kind of makes Bonnie's situation even more depressing, because knowing Yu-Gi-Oh was once a citizen of Sorbet before becoming the doctor of Bonnie's crew, and just getting the characterization for him that we do within this flashback does compile even more weight on Bonnie's actions and why she refuses to give up, even if she might have to, which also makes me think either Bonney is either probably going to be traveling with the Straw Hats for a little while longer, at least until we have a face-to-face with Dragon, or she'll part ways with them to find Dragon herself and join the revolutionaries as a way of honoring Kuma's sacrifice and Ginny's memory. But in either case, I think it does almost feel like, looking at her journey as a whole, it does feel like he is setting Bonney up as to pretty much join join hands with the revolutionaries at some point. I could be wrong, but it does kind of feel like he's foreshadowing that idea, at least for now. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. From on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of the Night signing off. Later, everyone.